welcome back to the Libertarianism.uk podcast with me, Andy Duncan, and today's guest is a very special one. It's Dominic Frisby. You know him, you love him, the fantastic, the amazing, the multi-talented, the multifaceted Dominic Frisby. I first heard him as a BBC announcer, and then I met him, and then I heard his voice and I couldn't quite get it, and then I figured it out. And then later on I met him at the PFS conference in Bodrum with Professor Hopper a few years ago. At which he showed his video Debt Bomb to the professor, and the professor loved it. So that's Dominic's claim to fame. He's also an author, a singer, a rock star, a comedian, and we're going to get into all of that. He's also a TV star as well, and a TV anchor for things like The Money Pit, et al., and other various related financial-based TV shows. I thought today, as I heard him first on the BBC, we could kind of do a BBC Desert Island Discs kind of a thing with me as Roy Plumley and Dominic as Dominic. But I thought instead of him picking out AC/DC's Highway to Hell as his favourite music, which obviously that's my favourite music, I'm reflecting there, I thought we could go through his Libertarian Love Songs album, including and especially its most famous track on that you may have seen, which is the Brexit song, which has a different title, which YouTube might ban. So we'll talk about that title later on. So that's the kind of shape of the show. So without any further ado, welcome. Hello, Dominic Frisby.
Hello, sir. How's it going?
Okay, I'm sorry. I just need to get my headphones on there so that I can hear you and everything. Now, let us move on then. Let's get straight into it. The album.
Yeah, let's do it.
Libertarian. He's disappeared. He's run away.
I'm coming back.
He's coming back. That's good. The first track.
Sorry about that, Andy. I'm back in the room.
No problem. He's back in the room. A nice theatre thing there. The first track on the album is the national anthem of Libertaria, and it's to the tune of the Russian national anthem, which I always find quite moving for some reason. It must be me being a former communist or something. Now, I just wanted to ask you, Dominic, life would be much easier for you in media land if you were in the groove with everyone else, all the leftists and everyone. But you're a libertarian and a very strong libertarian. So how did you become a libertarian?
Well, I think it's a discovery that you make, isn't it? So I think I always was a libertarian. I just didn't know it. And I always had a healthy disregard for authority and being told what to do, particularly by people who I didn't particularly admire. Sorry, as I speak, my phone's just gone off, so let me just switch it off. But the way I discovered I was a libertarian was back in the noughties. I had this project called Kisses on a Postcard, which was this musical, and I was trying to work out how to make enough money to bring it to the West End. It was something that my dad had written, and we needed £5 million. And there were all these very interesting people talking on the internet about how to make money and about money and stuff. And so I started a podcast as a means to try and meet them. And it was a very popular podcast in the noughties. And so the first person I interviewed was Jim Rogers, who was ran the Quantum Fund with George Soros back in the day. And I just interviewed all these rich big cheeses. But in the course of investigating how to make this money, everyone was saying, you've got to be invested in commodities and you've got to be invested in gold. This was in the noughties. And so I started reading about gold. And then suddenly I never understood why house prices cost so much. And then I discovered, and it's all to do with, debt and the fiat-based money and all that. And I suddenly realized that I was a gold bug. And, because gold there's an honesty to gold, and it's sound money and all the rest of it, as all your listeners know. And I suddenly realized that if we're going to save the world and fix everything, we need to have sound money. And once we've got sound money, everything else falls into place. And, when you invest in gold, it's a very political investment because of gold's role as money throughout history. And so everything suddenly made sense to me, from natural law to fiat-based money, to low taxes, to individual responsibility, all that. And it all just came really, it was a discovery rather than a something I grew into.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about that, one thing Dominic did for me is we actually met in South London, and then he introduced me to James Turk at Gold Money, and Dominic helped me get Gold Money podcast along with Dominic and Alistair McLeod. So thank you very much for that, Dominic. Yeah, I think most people are naturally libertarian. I think it takes a lot of state education and a lot of media to persuade people to be the other way, but trying to remove that propaganda and brainwashing is very, very tough for us. So that's the story.
I had a conversation with Douglas Carswell the other day, and he said, and I was moaning about, because we'd had this really good BBC pilot, and we'd done the pilot and they didn't commission the series, and the pilot was really good, and it's because of the change of commissioner. But Douglas said, if the BBC allocated just 2% of its output to people like you and Dan Hannan and free market people, we would persuade the country in no time. But there is just zero. Any libertarians who are on the telly keep their politics to themselves.
Yeah,
that's the way they stay on. I'm pretty sure Portillo's a libertarian, for example.
Yeah. We'll come on to that. We'll also come on to Boris Johnson and his libertarianism, which is mentioned in one of your songs. So let's move on then to one of your.
Well, let me tell you about the national anthem of Libertaria, because we never talked about it.
Yeah.
So this is the Libertarian national anthem. And whenever an audience comes and sees one of my shows, I make the whole audience stand up and sing the Libertarian national anthem.
Brilliant.
and if it's going to be a national anthem, I have to use a national anthem. So I Googled which are the best national anthems, music. And you may not know this, but according to Google, the Uruguayan national anthem is the best national anthem.
Oh, okay.
It has the most chords, it has the most key changes, but it goes on for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And if I asked you to sing the Uruguayan national anthem, nobody can sing it. But Russia comes in second.
Yeah, it's a great piece of music.
It's a great piece of music. And I just thought it was ironic to have what was originally composed as the hymn of the Bolshevik Party to be used as the Libertarian national anthem. And the other reason, of course, why I used it is it's out of copyright.
Oh, brilliant. Which would be funny if they actually tried to use it against you. I'm actually a quarter Russian for my sins. I did one of these gene studies, and I'm a quarter Russian. It's a mysterious story involved in the Second World War, but let's not get into that. I actually feel completely Russian when I listen to the Russian national anthem. I feel I want to stand up and be proud and salute Putin and all these guys. I just feel very Russian whenever I hear that anthem.
A friend of mine went to one of the annual libertarian conferences in Lieberland, and afterwards everyone got pissed and they went and had a karaoke, and apparently they played the Libertarian national anthem during the karaoke, and it was one of the great moments of the weekend. I have to say, I spent months on those lyrics, because to fit every libertarian sentiment and condense it into a language that exactly matches the rhythm of the original song was just a huge undertaking. And like every day I'd get like maybe one clause or one sentence right, and it was a real war of attrition. But I'm really proud of those lyrics. And so the Libertarian national anthem is one of my proudest moments.
It is fantastic. I'll just go through some of the lines. Some of my favorite lines is my first: "Arise, libertarians, above totalitarians." That's nice. I like that. And then the next kind of pair of lines, it reminded me of the Imagine song, by John Lennon, which is the communist anthem. So it's kind of an anti-Imagine, I think, this song. I think maybe one of you should do Imagine, but do different words for it. I tend not to revoice famous songs, partly because other comics, it's sort of frowned on as a device. And also it just runs you into so much trouble on YouTube with algorithms and all the rest of it. It's just better to just do original stuff. But let me read you the lyrics if you like. Shall I read you the lyrics? Okay,
or do you want to read them?
Just quick, as quick as you can.
Arise, libertarians, above totalitarians. Our guide is the mighty invisible hand. Reject state controllers, collectors and patrollers. Our choices are better than government plans. Taxation is a form of theft. Free markets and free trade are best. Free speech, free movement, free minds and free choice. Our actions are all voluntary, not coerced or compulsory. War we abhor, socialism does not work.
Yeah.
There we go. That's the
Brilliant.
first two verses.
I've got tears coming to my eyes there. It's just brilliant. I like as well. No, what's this? No debt or inflation. No confiscation as well. There's another one.
Stealth confiscation.
Stealth confiscation. And no more fiat currency. Gold and Bitcoin are our money. I think that's nice as well.
We scorn your fiat currency.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant stuff. Let's move on then.
And the final line is, we take responsibility. We own ourselves and we live and let live. We take responsibility, life, love and liberty. Leave us alone. Let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Oh, so it's kind of Hayekian poetry, isn't it, really? It's wonderful.
It is. And that's also a reference to Mao's line.
Oh, of course.
He said that, let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Yeah, out of the barrel of a gun as well with Mao. So let's move on then to the second song, which is Keyboard Warrior, which is kind of a very punk rocky style. I'm going to tie this in with Hate Speech, Song 7, which has a similar kind of theme. Now, you're a libertarian comedian, and I should imagine in comedy world, 99.9% are left-wing comedians, so you must get a lot of stick, a lot of abuse, a lot of kind of people attacking you and trying to censor you and everything. So just for people out there who I want to try and bring into this world to try and push the libertarian message in their own way, to fight the culture war against the leftists, to help persuade them to do it, do you have any methods or tricks to kind of brush away all this hostility and all this aggression towards you and to carry on? How do you manage to keep going without just shrinking into a shell with all this hostility?
Well, it's not so much of, there's some comics who are openly hostile and they call for bookers not to book you. And that's the biggest thing, is not getting booked.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'll go and do, like, Comedy Unleashed is a sort of free speech comedy club, and I can go and do that and say whatever I like and the audience loves me. But if I'm doing, you know, another gig to a regular audience, I just have, you know, I can't just go on and advocate libertarian stuff because the audience won't like you. So, you know, you have to sort of temper what you do unless you're performing to your crowd. But that happens anyway with whatever it is that you talk about. You always have to scale down a bit. But the weapon of the anti-free speech person is to lobby bookers not to book you. Oof. And that often goes on without you even knowing about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
so it's a form of cancel culture.
I've had my own problems with, because I do financial training, and I've had people secretly behind my back call financial training companies to not use me. And then I found out about it. Usually people drink too much and then they tell somebody who tells me that that's what they're up to. So it's evil and insidious, isn't it? It's horrible. Really, really despise it.
It's really, really horrible.
Yeah. And I'm not going to stop talking to prevent this. I'll just move into another area. But it's evil that you're going to kill somebody by cutting off their income.
And I'm actually a fairly mild-mannered bloke. I'm not sort of one of these guys that goes out aggressively and argues with people. I just say what I say in a fairly gentle manner. I've always thought you persuade more people by being understated than overstated. But that said, you look at the people who, if you want to get on in the media in our polarized world, it pays to be one extreme or the other. Whatever extreme you take, it pays to be extreme. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to polarization, which is a terrible thing. You see it all over the world now, don't you? You're either pro-vaccines, pro-masks, pro-government COVID policy, or you're anti-mask, anti-vaccine. It's one or the other. You're blue or you're red, or you're black or you're white in so many areas. Which brings us to Brexit. Now, your most famous song off that album, and I loved you singing it at 11 o'clock. Was it just after 11 o'clock on the day Britain finally achieved Brexit? So there you are in Parliament Square with your band and your top hat and everything else, singing about Brexit. Now, I'll just do this in the tradition of Father Ted, the way Father Ted says the rude word. So 17 million Feck-Offs, a song about Brexit. Now, to me, secession is the road to freedom. It's our only road, I think, that we have to secede. Texas has to secede from the US. Scotland has to secede from the UK. Catalonia has to secede from Spain, and so on. I'm in Gibraltar, which did actually get to vote in the Brexit referendum, as you mentioned in your song. How I think that they're going to try to sneak us back into the EU somehow, the entire establishment. So on the ground, you're in the UK. How is Brexit going in the UK at the moment?
Well, it's going terribly because none of the things that we voted for have happened.
Yeah.
It's been handled by a bunch of people who don't get it. They're trying to derail it at every step of the way. It's been incredibly smeared. If we were to have the vote now, I don't think we'd win it. It's not going well because everyone is trying to derail it. If only because then they can say, "I told you so."
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you about secession, and that's why I campaign for it. I want decisions made locally, and the more local, I think London should secede. It's just London's different to the rest of the UK now, and bizarrely, the sort of libertarian strongholds are all sort of former colonies that neither seceded from the empire. There's sort of places like Bermuda and Gibraltar and the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man and probably the Falklands. I don't even know.
Yeah.
But these are the sort of libertarian low tax outposts. In other ways, they're not that free. But yeah. So I'm a friend of mine is quite high up in the Shetland Islands.
Yeah.
And it amused me that when Sturgeon was campaigning for Scottish independence, and bizarrely, Scottish independence is a very left-wing thing, but he then put a thing in, and the Shetland said, well, if Scotland wants independence, we want independence from Scotland.
Yeah, brilliant. Love it.
And the Shetland has all the oil.
Yeah, it's a Pandora's box, isn't it? All these leftists in Edinburgh.
It is. And so, she couldn't take one and then not offer the other. So, but yeah, worst Shetland to achieve independence. I think that might be my first destination.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. I'm hoping Texas goes independent. I'm going to try and move there.
I don't think it will.
Yeah.
And Florida as well. And it's an obvious thing for it to do. And there's enough people on board with all that stuff there. But, I wrote at great length about the American Civil War in my book, Daylight Robbery.
Yeah.
And that war was not about what you think it was about.
Yeah.
That war was about maintaining Union tax revenues, which were largely paid from the South.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of that war, and Lincoln said it repeatedly, was to maintain the Union.
Yeah.
And the idea that America would let Texas or Florida secede it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it would take an enormous amount of work for people to get it to happen. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't have been called a civil war.
They just wouldn't let it.
It shouldn't have been called a civil war, should it? Because a civil war is when two groups are fighting for the same state. I always call it the Northern War of Aggression, the American Civil War.
Well, it's exactly what it was. The secessionists' army was half the size of the Unionists. There was no way they could beat the Northerners in a war. They couldn't.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope you're wrong about that. I hope they do. Florida or Texas does manage to get out, but I think you're right that even if they do, it will be an incredible struggle to get out of that. Just wanted to mention my favourite line from that song. It's when you mention Lord Adonis and who the feck's he anyway. I just love that line because he's the guy who said who was in charge of airport security, and he brought in all these things where you have to put your hands up and you get scanned and everything. I thought that was disgusting. So I loved it a couple of years later when you particularly singled him out for abuse.
Nobody knows who he is.
I know who he is. Okay, that brings us on then to, again, related. I like the way that most of these are related. Number 4, the Maybe song. Now here you talk about Donald Trump. You talk about Theresa May. You also mentioned Boris Johnson as well. Now, with the Tory party, some of us libertarians in the UK hanker back to Margaret Thatcher, who used to hand out copies of Hayek books and so on when she was on the road. But do we have to completely now just give up on the Tory party? Are they now just a wing of the WEF? Do we just have to give up on them completely?
Yes.
Yeah, nice short answer to a question. It is grim, isn't it? How bad
they always talk about. I actually think Rishi Sunak's doing quite a good job, and there's only so much he can do. And and he's just sort of quietly. It's like he's got a list, and he's going, right, I'm going to do this one next, and I'm going to do this one, and he got his. I don't even know if I haven't read his Northern Ireland deal. And I don't know if it's good or not, but he's got it over the line, and he got the support of Steve Baker. And if Steve Baker says it's okay, then I'll support Steve because Steve's a hero of mine.
Yeah,
but he does seem, he does. I mean, I do think he's a technocrat, but he does seem to be doing a reasonable job within the confines of the modern political thing. It's never going to be hard line enough for a true libertarian.
Yeah.
But with all these Matt Hancock text messages that are coming out, you're learning just how bad the establishment is.
Yeah.
And, one of the arguments that came up in the Brexit vote is, should we stay in and reform from within? You can't.
Yeah. Well, that brings me on. Yeah, okay, keep going.
I just think, and the British political party system, it's a two-party system, and you hope that the Libertarians would own the Conservative Party, but it doesn't. And I just think anyone, they're going to get, I don't think they're going to get trounced as much as everyone says they're going to get trounced, because I think Starmer's got it wrong about immigration and what a big issue that is. But what do I say? It wouldn't surprise me if we get another John Major, but we need another party. But I just don't think I don't think libertarianism is possible in the UK.
So what should we do then? I just want to mention the fifth song there, the Feck the Government, the ANCAP Calypso, which has some nice Misesianism in that. Now, Steve Baker, of course, is a good Misesian. He's almost as good. He almost follows Mises as much as I do, I think, which is a big thing for me to say. And he's got, my favourite line is, free movement didn't cause inequality, it was your interventionist policies, which is another nice line. Is there anything we can do then to promote liberty in the UK? And we've got Reform Party, which used to be headed by Nigel Farage. What can we do to encourage libertarianism in the UK?
Just go on making the argument, I suppose.
Yeah.
In a way that chimes with as many people as possible. I think the problem is, like, a friend of mine showed a poll to me the other day about what the public thought the government had got right about COVID. And all the stats now show that the voluntary approach was the best approach. And, in terms of outcomes, and when you measure the outcomes, you have to consider the expense, the number of deaths, the infection rate, the number of deaths caused by the vaccine and all the rise in heart attacks and all the rest of it. You have to factor all this in. But in terms of outcome, Sweden was probably the most voluntarist of all the nations, and it had the best outcomes. But even with that evidence and all the new stuff about the Matt Hancock revelations and the relationship between rising heart attacks and the vaccination, even with all that stuff, 37% of the UK still think the government should have gone in harder.
Yeah. It's
call it a round number of 40%. 40% of the UK want more government.
Yeah.
They're literally saying, govern me more. And, if you had control of the media and you could, as Carswell said, we had 2 or 3% of the BBC's output was making the libertarian argument, then maybe more people would be persuaded, because we're right.
Yeah.
But, when 40% of the country is saying the government didn't do enough, it shows you what, and I imagine that figure is common across Europe.
Yeah.
You realise what an impossible uphill battle we've got.
Yeah. No,
that's honestly what the ANCAP Calypso is. People think that more government is the answer. They think it's because government's got decisions wrong. It's not. It's the problem.
Yeah, it is incredible how powerful they are. So,
Who made the laws on drugs? The government. Who ignored child rape gangs? The government.
Yeah.
Who put kids into debt? The government. Yet we expect the government to sort things out. Feck the government.
Yeah.
That's the lyric.
I think Mises describes this well, doesn't he? He says the more government you have, the more islands of chaos you have. So if you look at something like the NHS, it's an island of chaos, but it survives because it lives off the tax generated by wealth producers.
It can't die.
It can't die. But if that gets bigger, I give people a thought experiment who's, I love the NHS. I say to them, can you imagine an NFS, a National Food Service? What if the government took over all the supermarkets? What would it be like? And they'll even describe to me, they'll say there would be queues, there'd be rotten food, there'd be food shortages, it would be very expensive, there'd be ration cards. So they describe the NHS as the NFS. And I said, well, what would you like a National Food Service? And they go, no, it would be terrible. And they said, well, you've got exactly the same with the NHS. What do you think of that? Oh, no, I love the NHS. I think there's this cognitive dissonance thing going on, which is incredibly hard for us to break through.
Well, it's a religion. And people don't like to, you just got to go on making the argument, but it's very hard to persuade people. And, I like to look at, I think the UK is in a really bad place at the moment.
Yeah.
And government can't even carry out its most basic function, which is to defend the borders. It is incapable of even doing that.
Yeah.
And, the court system is a mess. The legal system is a mess. Education is a mess. The health service is a mess. Everything is a mess. And everywhere that is a mess is somewhere that, even the Royal Mail is a mess. I'm still getting Christmas cards now.
Yeah.
Trains. And you go, well, trains and Royal Mail are privatised. But they're basically state institutions. And everywhere that is a mess involves the heavy hand of government. But if you look at shops or the media or any food, clothing, user dissatisfaction levels are not comparable.
Yeah.
And one involves government and one doesn't. And it's just so patently obvious, but just people do not get it because, that we should have a national health service is so normalized in people's minds that they think the only alternative is America. Never mind that America spends twice as much almost in healthcare as we do per capita. So, there are areas in the world that are functioning well, and they're all areas where there is little government intervention.
Yeah. The common denominator with failure is always government, isn't it? Every time something
Absolutely.
goes wrong in my life that I'm not in control of, I sometimes don't even see the government. I think Jeffrey Tucker wrote a good article about this once. He was saying he was having a horrible shower and he couldn't get enough water through the shower kind of outlet. And then he looked into it and there's a government regulation about how much water showers can put out. And that was why he was having a bad shower. Lawnmowers that don't work anymore. Why? There's a government regulation about how powerful lawnmowers can be. It's just wherever there's a problem, if you look hard enough, you will find the dead hand of government behind it somehow. And where they are removed, like in computing and various other things, I know not big tech, but computer devices and so on, where there's a free spread of things you can buy and choose to buy, it tends to be much, much better, although there's nothing that's completely free of government regulation.
People were much more happy with big tech before they got into bed with government. It's only since they've got into bed with government that people are like, it's biased.
Yeah. Well, that's why, we could get into Elon Musk, I suppose, with Twitter, but then
let's not. There are people who know more about it than me.
We'd have a 4-hour podcast on that. So moving on to the next track then, Secretly in Love with Nigel Farage. So I think he's a hero. I think a 20-year fight, taking massive abuse from everybody in the world just about involved with living off taxes or parasites living off taxes, attacked him and attacked him and attacked him. And he still survived and he still managed to get the UK out of EU, at least temporarily. Now
I think he's our one hope.
Yeah. Is he doing anything at the moment? Is he semi-retired? Can we turn to Nigel Farage or is he now exhausted and spent?
I think he's certainly exhausted, but he's got phenomenal energy. And, he's presenting his programme on GB News, and that's taking up all his time, and he's doing his investment stuff with Southbank. So he's a pretty busy guy, and, he's in a lot of demand from the media, always wanted to get him on. So I was reasonably matey with him when I was working for GB News last year. And I just said, I kept saying to him, God, we need you back in politics. And he would just say, there's only, I can't achieve anything with the two-party system. Until we get rid of the two-party system, I can't do anything. But I know his current outlook is that Labour win the next election, and then 2 years into Labour, everyone realises they're just as bad, if not worse, as the Tories.
Yeah.
And then something's going to happen. But, you know, he's one of the few beacons of hope.
Yeah, you do wonder how bad it has to...
I pray that he makes a return to politics.
You do wonder...
And you saw, like, they stopped him winning Thanet, South Thanet. They just totally rigged that local by-election against him. It's just... The UK politics is so corrupt and rigged, and it's designed to protect itself.
Yeah.
It's designed that it can never unravel.
Yeah. So it's a log rolling. I think Lou Ruckle calls it log rolling, doesn't he? Where they set up the boundary commissions to choose the area. So you all have a Conservative MP and you all have a Labour MP. Let's move the boundaries to kind of lock that in stone. Professor Hopper, of course, is totally against democracy, and we can see why the results it's created. It's just chaos. And if it's not chaos,
it's awful. And
it's horrible.
I say representative democracy is neither representative nor democratic.
Yeah. So, wondering how we can get out of that. Now, that brings us on then to the strangest song on the album. When I went through it, I was trying to find a libertarian link to all of it, but I struggled with Passive Aggression, your 8th song. So it does talk about passive aggression. So you're thin for your age, or you're all these passive aggressive phrases. What's the libertarian link to that song? I didn't.
There isn't really.
Oh,
it's just a funny song. It's just a funny song about passive aggression. It's a funny comic song, and people find that song really funny. But it's just a song about passive aggression. It's not libertarian in any way.
Yeah. Sorry, I was trying to be clever there and I was looking for an angle and I couldn't spot one.
No, that's because there isn't one.
I did find an angle with the Gobbledeegook Song, and that's where you do a song in complete Glaswegian, such as impossible to understand. Now, I'm partly Scottish as well, so I can understand a little bit of Glaswegian, and I do go to Glasgow occasionally, and I can kind of get it. You must have had some bad... Did that come from a bad experience?
No, it was just, Glasgow? Again, it's just another... The idea of the song is, this is when an Englishman's walking through a Scottish city on a Saturday night, this is what he hears. And that was all it was.
Yeah, so I can vaguely make out something, because sometimes I end up on New Year's Eve and I'm in Scotland with my Scottish family, and I could just about make out what they're saying, although they treat me with kid gloves because I have an English accent, which upsets them, I think. That brings us on.
Duncan is a good Scottish word, good Scottish name.
Yeah, Andrew Duncan as well. People in Scotland think something's gone wrong with me because I don't sound Scottish. That brings us then to the final song, which is 11, Ode to a Compost Heap. Now,
Two Black Eyes. You missed Two Black Eyes.
Yeah, I was going to. I put that actually in with an earlier song. I think the Brexit song, because it's talking about Brexit there. So if we look at song 11, Ode to a Compost Heap. Now, at first it sounds a bit odd. It doesn't sound very libertarian, but it is. And I think it's a nice Hayekian kind of tune. So I've got a couple of lines here that I've picked out. Nothing is wasted. So Dominic's talking about a compost heap and how you just put stuff on it and then you sit back and then miraculously it works. It produces soil without any intervention by anybody, through people, just bugs and worms and cockroaches and wood lice all just doing their own thing. And my favourite lines are, nothing is wasted nor centrally planned in a compost heap. It's like Adam Smith's invisible hand, so that's nice. And then this is an example, it's plain to see, of a functioning free market economy. So that's a really nice song. What inspired you to use that as an analogy?
Well, it's actually a poem, really, an accompanied poem, and it's a sonnet, and it fits all the conventions of the sonnet form. And I wrote it one time. I was doing a writing course in the west of Ireland with a guy called Paul Kingsnorth, and he said, right, everyone go outside for 5 minutes and write something. And I was standing, I'd always liked compost heaps, and I was standing next to a compost heap, and it had always occurred to me that, you know, every single insect in the compost heap, they tirelessly process the peel and the rind with nothing but their self-interest in mind.
Yeah.
And the result is that all those different insects, beetles and ants and worms and lice, they're all acting in their own self-interest. And the result is that your compost turns from bits of tea bags and stale bread and bananas and whatever into fantastically fertile soil without any government planning whatsoever.
Yeah, in fact, if there was government planning, then it wouldn't. It would still remain a rotten mess that didn't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
For anybody.
They'd be sent to China or something.
Yeah, what does Hayek call this? He calls this the spontaneous harmony or something. I can't remember the exact name that he used. But yeah, markets do it. Evolution does it as well. So things evolve to fit into their environment, as Darwin might say, almost perfectly. Never perfectly, but almost perfectly. And there is no invisible, there is no God, there is no designer. It just works kind of by itself, which is brilliant. Okay, that takes us through the whole album, which is fantastic. So let's get towards a wrap up then. You just told me earlier about another album that you've just worked on, and that's Gammon Proud. Can you tell us about that album?
Sure. Well, Libertarian Love Songs was my first album from I don't even know what year, 2018, 2019, something like that. And then my second album was Anthems for the Excommunicated, which came out in I don't even know what that was, 2020. Well, that's 2020.
That's COVID period.
And then my last album was 2022 that came out, and that's called Gammon and Proud.
What's the reference there? Is that kind of because the French call us roast beefs, don't they, or something?
No, you know that gammon is a pejorative term used to describe white middle-aged men.
Oh, okay. Well, that's you and me, isn't it?
Absolutely, we are gammon and we are gammon, and it's like a pejorative, and particularly Brexity white middle-aged men, and so I just did the same, black and proud. I took the same device and said Gammon and Proud. Yeah,
there was a great gay anthem, wasn't it? Glad to be gay. I can't remember the guy who did it. So is it kind of in that kind of vein of standing? I'm proud to be this, even though you all think it's bad.
Well, it's. I think in terms of musicality, it's the best song I've ever written, and because it's very kind of inspired by those French kind of Jacques Brel and those kind of people, those French chanteurs, those French lyricists, and the song is like 6 minutes long, and it goes through all sorts of different styles, but it's all basically an homage to the pig.
Okay, so my favourite actually of yours is that national anthem of Libertaria, which is just fantastic. And I'm glad you spent the time and the effort in a kind of Douglas Adams fashion, just crafting one line at a time to make it a perfect song. I do love that one. Now, is there anything?
There's another one on. There's another one on Gammon Proud that you'll like as a libertarian, which is "Show Me the Way to Ancapistan."
Well, it's not Gibraltar. It might be one of these old British places, mightn't it? Like the Cayman Islands or Monaco or all the kind of places Professor Hobb talks about, Andorra and all these other places. Is there anything else going on in your life at the moment? Do you have any gigs on or TV shows coming up or anything that we need to see?
Yeah, I've got a big gig in May in the West End in a venue called Crazy Cocks. And that's going to sell out, but there's still some tickets left now. Yeah. And that's me and the band, and that'll be really good. Those are fantastic nights, and that's when everyone stands up and sings the Libertarian national anthem, and pride sweeps over the room. And they're rare oases in the barren desert of British cultural life, rare libertarian oases. Yeah. So that's good, and then I'm writing my Substack all the time, and that's proving very popular. And so if listeners are wondering how to find out more about me, I'd go to the Flying Frisbee, which is my Substack, which is going great guns.
Brilliant. So how are you just generally, I didn't ask you, how are you just feeling about libertarianism? Are you glad you went down the libertarian road all those years ago, or do you wish you'd just become a left-wing comedian?
No, I'm really glad about, I just know I'm right. And as do most libertarians, but I'm also know, there was a great line that I quoted in one of my books that I just read on a forum once upon a time, which was, find the right answer, realize you will never see it in your lifetime, but advocate it anyway because it's the right answer.
Yeah, I love that photograph. The guy in the crowd watching a Hitler rally, and he's like this, and everyone else is like this. I love that photograph. which is a fantastic photograph. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Dominic, for coming on the show today. It's been fantastic. I wish you the very best of luck in the West End and with all your other endeavours. For everyone else, thank you for your time and for watching today, and I'll see you again next week.
Cheers, Andy.